Greenock in West Scotland during the 1980s was a town in turmoil. The maritime industry was in decline and unemployment on the rise. But perhaps the biggest blow to hit the town came in 1986 when a local teenager was brutally murdered just yards from her doorstep.
I have to leave this house and I have to pass by the place where my daughter was killed. And I know people are looking at me and feeling sorry for me and feeling sorry for my family. Well, I don't want them to feel sorry for me if they know something and they're not going down to the police. There's no good sending me a sympathy card.
Elaine Doyle, aged 16 at the time, was attacked and strangled just 50 yards from her front door. 25 years on, her parents, their health now frail, are as determined as ever to bring her killer to justice.
Good morning, everybody. Wow, I'm in Greenock. I'm here to tell you the murder and how it took 25 years to get solved. It happened on the 1st June, or 2nd of June, overnight of 1986. And she was killed just 40 yards away from her front door. And it was one of Scotland's biggest unsolved cases for decades. I'm going to show you a couple of the locations, but because of the weather I might let the Crime Watch thing do most of the talking, but I hope you enjoy.
So what do we know about that fateful evening in June 1986? It was the Sunday of a bank holiday weekend, and millions of people across the country would have been staying up late to watch the Mexico World Cup matches on TV.
Okay, Dad, that's me off to the disco now.
All right, darling.
And advised her always to use the main roads to get back home. When she left the Celtic Club, I think she was still with friends. I think a lot of her friends lived in the east end of the town.
Yeah, so this is the supporters club. This is where she was on the night. It's all so close. And you do... This is the supporters club. It's all so close together. It's such a British morning, isn't it? She went from here to Cathcart, where the town hall is, to get a hamburger. And there's people in there polishing stuff. And and that's just like a 5-minute walk down there. And her home is about a 5-minute walk over in that direction. It's not changed at all. It's interesting because you do these videos and it's all changed so much. From the 80s, I do a lot of 80s videos. It's not changed whatsoever. Yeah. But yeah, this is where she was. And John Doherty was there that night as well. I imagine the town hall must be over there. Obviously I'm not from this area, so that sky. John Doherty, the person that did kill her, was there that night. And he was never questioned at the time on the day. But I'll get more into that.
I think a lot of her friends lived in the east end of the town. So they went to a hamburger van in Cathcart Street. And they chatted for a while, and then they went their way and Elaine came west.
Oh, the weather this morning. And this is Cathcart Square, or Cathcart Street. I was talking to the microphone. And this is where she came to get a hamburger on that night. But although the location itself is not that interesting, let me quickly show you around. Is that the library over there? The library's near here, but it's just far too wet.
From here, Elaine would have taken a route through Hamilton Way towards her home in the west end of Greenock. And although it was late, many would have still been up enjoying the bank holiday weekend and the football.
And she got within 40 yards of her home when she was grabbed and pulled into this lane beside the Air Training Corps building. And that's where she was killed.
So this is the street Elaine would have been walking on that night. This is the street she lived on. And it was here where she was pulled into the alley just here. Let me flip you around. It's like a RAF training corps, and her home is the red one there, or was. That's how close she made it on that night in 1986. You think so close, the gate's locked, so I can't go down. There's loads of footage here from 1986. I'll put some on. It's quite strange, because it's about 3 minutes worth of just like the police investigation. There's kids playing here, and they're going through all the rubbish here. Yeah, this is where it happened. And she lived there, so she was that close. From that gate to there. I think that's part of what made the case so interesting to the public eye, of just quite how close she was. And there was an eyewitness, the rain's starting again. He said he saw a man stood behind a woman just down here. This is Argowran Street, and he said that he had red hair. He's absolutely throwing it down now. And that was one of the only things the police had to go on for a long time. The police is the case and the investigations covered in a lot of controversy and about what kind of job they did, but it's easy to criticise and everything. But one thing that a police officer did do, he used sellotape strips, and he used it on Elaine's body, and it's from these strips that 25 years later they could get a DNA match. I'm going to get back in the car, it's shucking it down.
A couple of weeks later, her handbag was found burning.
This had been missing from the night of the murder, and it was found, I believe, on the steps of the Watt Library.
Which is literally the other side of Argowran Square.
Nobody could understand where it had been or who had set it on fire.
was a panic in the area. I think there was a lot of things going on. People were suspecting they were getting followed.
Everybody knew that it was likely there was a killer in the town.
Although the location itself is not that impressive, I really need to get out of this rain. I have no means to wash my clothes on this trip, and I don't want wet clothes. The library, which I'm hoping is down here. Oh no, this is a mall. Might have to call this bit off. Her handbag, Elaine's handbag, was found burning on the steps of the library, which is in around here, but it's a bit too wet for me. But yeah, this is Cathcart Square. I'll be totally honest, at this stage of proceedings I have no idea whereabouts in the video I am. I am absolutely soaked. The trials and tribulations of doing videos, but I was driving back to my hotel and I saw this little spot, so I thought I'd do the rest of the story here. Very quiet, very tranquil. Yeah, well, I hope you like the setting for the rest of the story. So Elaine worked in a jewellery store, so she was 16 years old. So we went to the Stoic Supporters Disco. Greenwich's just down there. I'd say 5 miles. I've come about 5 miles up the Clyde. Does that work? It is nice here. Weird, I've come here just on a whim, just drove past it and I thought, where am I going to do the end of this video? It's cleared up a little bit. It is actually still pretty grim over there. There's a memorial here for someone, so it's tragedy everywhere we look. And her friend, I think her name was Jo, who's on the Crime Watch. No, she's on another documentary saying she always regretted because she left her. Elaine would often stay at her house, and they went, after the disco, they went to the town square where I showed you to get a burger, and from there she walked back alone, and I mean it's a mile, if that, through like a town centre. You know, like that mile doesn't seem like much. Do you know what I mean? Like when you're in a town centre, a mile doesn't seem that much. So she walked down there, and yeah, she was 40 yards from her home. I'm sure I'm putting up the footage now of the little training corps and the home where she lived, just 40 yards away. I think that's why it grabbed people's attention. When it's a child, it always seems to be bigger news, and because she was so close to her home. I mean, if you looked out from the house, because they're quite big, like townhouses, if you looked out from her house, I think you would have been able to see where it happened. That's why, I think, numerous reasons of why it was so like huge. And yeah, like it could happen to anyone. I think that's the fear. It's weird. I think when it was raining, I said it was quite a once an affluent area and quite a poor area, trying to be a touristy area. I think interesting how little it's changed. I do videos, as you lot know, or maybe you don't, and I do quite old cases, and you go back and they've all changed so much, and you can't match up anything. Really, I try my best, but everything's the same here. Like everything. It's really weird. Like everything's the same. But she was murdered, and her mother, Elaine's mother, Margaret, she and her dad knew she hadn't come home, thought she'd stayed at a friend's house, and then they opened the curtains and there was police everywhere, and the father, John, he went down and asked the police officer, what's happened? My daughter's not come home. And then the police told him they found a body, and John, the father, asked how badly is she hurt. The police officer told him she was dead. and the police officer described what she was wearing, and her clothes became a part of the case because she was found naked, she was strangled, and the clothes were just folded neatly beside her, and her black and white dress was very distinctive. And when the police officer told the father about the black and white dress, that's how we found out. And yeah, lots of appeals, lots of TV footage which I'll put up, and showing them appealing for information.
Members of the public will say to you, oh, Elaine was in the wrong place at the time. But Elaine wasn't at the wrong place at the time. She was quite entitled to walk home safely without getting attacked and murdered.
Her murder sent shockwaves through the town and triggered the largest ever manhunt in the Inverclyde area. Witness sightings on the night compounded the police's belief that the suspect was local. On several occasions, a man was seen behaving erratically on and around Ardgowan Street and nearby Nelson Street. And there was also a sighting of a young man walking behind a woman who could have been Elaine at around the time of her murder, but none of these men were ever identified. Eventually, with few leads and no suspects, the investigation was scaled down. But in 2003, thanks to advances in forensics, scientists were able to isolate a DNA profile of Elaine's killer.
The Crime Watch reconstruction that I'm using is from 2011, and it was then when they were working on Operation Evergreen, I believe, and they were able to take a sample of DNA, and they tested lots of people in the area, and there was a person in the area called John Doherty who was at the Celtic Supporters Club the same night, and they only knew that in 1986 John Doherty's friend said this guy was here, and they never questioned him in 1986. But they went round to his house in 2011 to take a DNA sample. They say he was just a nice guy, a family man, he had a kid, he had a wife. They never thought anything of it, and a few weeks later they got a match for John Doherty. John Doherty lived in the area. At the time he went away to be a soldier and was living nearby again, and had lived in obscurity for almost 30 years. So there must be a lot of Johns in Scotland, because the father's John, Elaine's brother is John, the person that did the murders, John. So I'm getting a lot of the Johns mixed up. But John Doyle, not the father but her brother, Elaine's brother, went to school with this John Doherty, and they shared PE classes together, which is eerie and creepy, isn't it? Clearing up now, quite nice, isn't it? As well as the DNA from the night, there was an eyewitness account, and the eyewitness said, if you show me pictures of the person, I'll be able to tell you if it was him. I will remember the staring eyes. And I tried to do as much research as I could, and I couldn't work out if this is the person that saw the man behind the woman near where she was found dead and near the time that she was found. I assume it is, if that's where the redhead Efit came from. I don't know, but he said he would be able to eyewitness him, and they showed the eyewitness pictures of John Doherty from the Sun from 1986. I'll put the picture up, and he said that's definitely the guy I saw. And after 26 years, one of Scotland's best known unsolved murders, cold cases, was solved, and he was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 21 years, I believe. I wanted to touch on, I thought if I used the Crime Watch footage, and they say the parents are in ill health. Well, one of the tragedy this family had, I mean, just after the Crime Watch reconstruction was June 2011. In September, Jack Doyle, Elaine's nephew, and Margaret and John Doyle's grandparents, was murdered in Greenock as well. And the following January, so just 3 months later, John Doyle, the father, passed away of cancer.
Detectives are urging a teenager's killer to come forward and ease his family's torment. It's emerged that 17-year-old Jack Doyle, found dead in Greenock, was the nephew of a teenage girl murdered in the same town more than 25 years ago. The Doyle family are said to be utterly devastated by his brutal death. Detectives are now trying to establish what happened in the last hours of Jack's life. Sharon Frew reports.
Now, 40 months after that, this John Doherty is sentenced. So the father, who is on all these appeals and fought so valiantly for information on this case, didn't get to see him jailed. And I was doing research because I wanted to find the grave. I know there is a grave, and there's little bits, and I can't find which is the grave exactly, which cemetery it's in to look. And it takes me about 40 minutes to find a grave normally, and I don't know which one. In the documentary I saw, they focus on Greenock Cemetery in the footage. Her brother, Elaine's brother, John Doyle, is buried in another cemetery, and her parents are buried in Inverkip Cemetery, which is even further down the coast. So I decided not to do it, but I was doing this research and I found out obituaries for her brother, John Doyle. He passed away, let me just check my notes quickly. So John Doyle passed away in 2017. So Maureen Doyle had her 16-year-old daughter murdered. Then in 2011, her 17-year-old grandson murdered. And then 4 months after that, her husband died of cancer, and in 2017 her other son died. So she lived through her 2 children dying and one of her grandchildren dying, and she wasn't even that old. This murder just obliterated this family. It's how hard her life must have been, the mother's life. Insane, and that's why I wanted to do it. I just couldn't believe the trauma that this one person must have gone through. And like I said in the Caroline Glackland case, it's interesting, unsolved murders, I don't often do them, and this one was unsolved for so long, it's solved now, but you see the people get older through doing research, and documentaries got to do quite a lot of research to do these, would you believe? And you just see her in 1986, you see her, there's a report 8 years later, so 1994, you see her in the 2000s, you see her in 2011, so you just see her getting older, and you just, this was her life, this just took over her life, this must have just engulfed her, and you just imagine what it does. Yeah, so I hope you enjoyed. Sorry I couldn't get to the grave. I thought it could be hours without finding it. I'll put a picture of the parents by the grave. Also, when I was over there, I was chucking it down, so I didn't really want to look in the rain, I'll be honest with you. But that's it. Please like and subscribe. I hope you enjoyed. Awful story. I'll try and do a brighter one soon. I'm doing all these pretty things. I'm going to Loch Lomond, I'm walking around places like this, and I show you nothing but I do where murders happened, which is weird, isn't it? Anyway, have a nice day. Peace.